in for this important show. This is Nathaniel Lee. I'd like to thank my audience in Chicago and all over the country, and particularly here in Indianapolis. Thanks so much. We have our superstar panel today. We have Attorney Primes and Grimes to assist. But before I get started, I want to make something real clear. I thank you, young lady I saw at the cleaners today. I need to continue to remind people, if you've been in trouble with the law, whether you've been in jail, state prison, or otherwise, you can still vote. So make sure that you pass that on. I keep running across folks that drive me crazy who think they can't vote because they've had some run-in with the law. Folks, in Indiana, you're allowed to vote in most places in the country. Also, I call in numbers 833-653-3529. So 833 in Lee Law, or 833-653-3529. Now, gentlemen, by way of introduction, there are so many important legal cases that have hit the airwave, but there's some that I know P. Diddy is one we could talk about, but I want to start with the Supreme Court decision. I have been working on these 1983 cases, the police action shooting case, my entire professional career. We were set a deadly setback in the Day versus City of Indianapolis case, where the Supreme Court disallowed our writ we won at the district court level. That is, that they allowed a police officer to kill a Black teenager in the streets of Indianapolis, and we were unable to successfully continue with the jury trial to get a substantial damage award because he was given immunity. And that decision still bothers me because the immunity argument has been used to protect officers who engaged in wrongful shooting. And so a few years ago, there was a Black motorist down in Texas driving a rental car, and the rental car had some outstanding toll fees. Now, it's important to put this in context. That is that when you get a rental car, you don't know the history. It could have had 50 people have driven that car during the last year. And when we go through toll plazas, the fees are not calculated until sometime down the road. The one time that I missed a toll plaza place, I got the letter like 4 months later, and the $2 fee ended up being like, I think $57. I had to pay a fine on top of the $2 because I didn't know it was a toll road, but it was in the road, and I guess you had to pull over to go through the system. But I had a toll pass up. But in any event, it was $2. And what bothered me about this case is that a reasonable officer, when they pulled the tag and registration, it would show who the owner of the vehicle would be. It was like, whether it's Hertz, Enterprise, Avis, whatever, it would show that. And so with that evidence, because they used the 2-second rule, that is what was going through the officer's mind when he jumped on the car. By way of introduction, the decedent, Ashton Barnes, was pulled over while he was driving a rental car. The officer ordered him to pull over, but when the officer approached his car, Barnes began to drive away at a slow pace. The officer then jumped on the car, and when the car started moving, he took out his gun and shot and killed Barnes. And that's and then the lower court threw the case out because they used a very narrow legal analysis, that is the moment of threat. So forget about what happened historically, the fact that Barnes had not committed any crime, or that it wasn't his toll that was on and it's a rental car. So whether you rent a car or you buy a rental car, you don't know the history. So the officer should have known that, but that was not relevant. at the district court or the appellate court level. Only those 2 seconds when he hopped on the freaking cart and killed the guy. And so that's the case. And counsel, this case I thought was important because here in Indianapolis in 3 months, we had 18 black guys shot and killed by police officers, 18. And so in all those cases, they're going to be claiming qualified immunity. But this case here will allow most of these cases to go to trial, thank God.
My question is, what do we know what caused this young man, after pulling over, stopping and cooperating, what caused him to take off? Was there a threat of some type, verbal or physical, or what? Do you know? Do we know?
No, I don't know. I didn't talk to his lawyer. I was intending on calling his attorney up to find out what precipitated, because I learned something very important today in one of my death cases, Milton, and also Marlon. That is, the body cams on police officers, I didn't realize this, but it started recording what the officer is doing secondarily from the moment he leaves the police station. I didn't know that until this week when we looked at the signs on most of the police body cams. I thought that they had to activate the body cam, not realizing that the camera itself records it and stores it on the cloud. And that's important evidence.
Nate, I'll forget it if I don't interrupt. Was the officer in danger when he had to jump on the car, or did he place himself in danger by jumping on the car? I'm curious about those questions.
I saw the video, and on the video, the officer wasn't in danger until he jumped on the car.
Well, okay. I'm just saying, because your answer to the last question, not knowing what the young man was threatened with or why he pulled off, concerns me. And I hate to bring up old cases, but I remember in the King case, King got out of the car, cooperated, hands up, laid down on the ground, and an officer got down beside him and said, N-word, we're going to kill you. You better run. Then he gets up, and the video comes on as he's getting up off of the ground after lying down, spread like Jesus Christ. And that's why he was going to run, because he was told, if you don't run, we're going to kill you. That's when the video came into play. So a person cooperating and stopping, what motivated them to change that position? Did he have a weapon or something he thought the officer was going to find? But I don't know, man. It's just, Nate, I see where the officers lie so much, even in the face of a video showing that they precipitated and provoked the flight or incident. It's not getting better, guys. Not getting better. You see what the court did? They threw out the plaintiff's case.
Yeah, what's the solution to this conundrum?
I think part of the solution is that, we need more training for officers, and particularly in the area of diversity, equity, inclusion. And right now, there's an all-out attack on DEI training. And in fact, if you look at the new guidance that the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, has issued, they indicated that, having DEI training in and of itself, some types of training can be discriminatory. If there is a pool of candidates, and any of us have served on a number of selection committees, and if we say, hey, look, this is not a good pool, it's not representative, the guidance from the EEOC says that can be discriminatory. And the problem that presents is that, we need to make sure that, individuals that are policing our streets not only have the education, but also have the sensitivity as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So unfortunately, I see us going backwards, and I think that we need to really push back on that particularly in our local communities, and making sure there's adequate training. I think that it's entirely appropriate to have, higher standards for individuals that want to serve as police officers. And like, all of us on this call, we have to get continuing legal education, upping the requirement in terms of the number of hours that these officers have to obtain to maintain their ability to police, and adding a DEI component to that, I think would be helpful as well.
You're not asking these officers to serve a Big Mac or to be the cashier for a dime purchase. You're putting them in a position of high responsibility, and they have life or death on their hip. So I was telling Marlon earlier before the show started about a chapter in Malcolm Gladwell's one of his latest book, I think it's Talking to Strangers, where he talks about where you have emotional labor, airline stewardesses, people who deal with the public, and they deal with people who could be up here with problems or just mellow, but they go from that in a given day. They may deal with 3 or 4 episodes of people with mental problems or dangerous situations. And unless they are educated, well paid, well trained, and selected cautiously, you're going to continue to have this problem. Nathaniel, is not going to go away because we have radio shows or we complain or we have lawsuits when you keep putting the same type person out there in these dangerous positions. And they are not well trained, they're not well paid. You can't pay them a McDonald's cashier's salary and expect these people to be educated to the degree you have to be to deal with what police officers deal with. It's just common sense. It's not going to change just because we complain. We have to set back and institute a system that get qualified police officers, not somebody who graduated from high school and went shooting and hunting with their daddy, or went into the armed services and came back and said, I can kill somebody. That doesn't make police officers.
Yeah, what I think we can do, I think oftentimes, there's a sense of frustration in terms of what's going on nationally, and people kind of, throw up their hands, hey, what can I do in my individual community, whether it be Indianapolis, Los Angeles, or Cleveland? Hey, one of the things that you can do, serving on these police commissions, making sure that, we're holding local elected officials accountable when these issues come up, demanding that, there's better training, better qualifications. Because I think one of the things that I've noticed in working in law enforcement for 30 years at the U.S. Attorney's Office is that, they're very conservative. The officers, the prosecutors, and they're not very diverse. And I think, we need to really encourage our young people that these are honorable professions to get involved with. You can do a lot of good. And I think, you may recognize this, one of our good friends, Johnny Cochran, made reference in his illustrious career that one of the most important positions that he held was when he was an assistant county prosecutor in Los Angeles. And he just indicated that, hey, there's so much that can be done in terms of who not to charge. So these are things that we have to encourage people to do.
Well, one of the problems that we deal with is that because of this attack on treating Black folks fairly, there's a dramatic decline in young Black students going to law school, being admitted into law school. So most folks don't realize that the next generation of people today going to be going for a long time before they see adequate diversity, because they're not going to be coming out of law school. So even if we want to try to help desegregate or make these U.S. attorneys office more racially diverse, there's not going to be a pool of candidates, because they've basically reducing the number of Blacks that are going to law school or any professional school right now. So most folks don't realize how significant this so-called attack on DEI. And we see that really it's not really anything about this argument is fair. The whole process is fundamentally unfair and discriminatory. And they made it okay for racist people to be racist. And it's out of the closet, and there's just overt racism going on now. In our state, for example, our governor is just terrible. I mean, the lieutenant governor was trying to justify the Missouri Compromise. I mean, it was the dumbest thing I've ever seen in terms of a person in a leadership position. And in fact, he de facto was endorsing slavery. And he's an elected official in Indiana. It was shameful. And the governor would not chastise him, or he was saying that those are words I wouldn't use. Oh, you wouldn't? And the fact remains, though, is that these situations ain't going to get any better until we get people in position by voting these folks out of office who are not responsive. We see voting does matter. Now, about this process, I know, Milton, you think there's better training, but hell, even with training, if you have a rotten apple to start off with, is rotten to the core, how in the hell are you going to fix it?
Can't expect different results by doing the same thing over and over again. You're going to get the same results.
Yeah, but see, my problem is that if we can't recruit people out of the community, like-minded folks, to be in law enforcement, to be prosecutors and stuff, just training people with background that, which you say, whether military or from the suburbs, that's not going to solve our problem. And by the way, the case down in Tennessee, it was black officers who murdered that guy, and looked like three of those guys were acquitted in state court.
A couple of weeks ago, 3 of them were acquitted. I don't know all of the facts that justified them moving him from one place to another and beating him, 4 or 5 officers, ever how many it was, on one man, especially when one of those officers had a problem with him because of some woman, not some woman, but because of a lady. I don't know all the facts, but what little I know doesn't make sense for that case.
Well,
Yeah.
I was in the process of hiring an expert witness on my police shooting case. I ended up talking to one of the investigators on that case. And, I learned that critical evidence about this video, it turns out that the cameras that they used in Memphis, the body cam footage started when they left the department. And so because they found this evidence, after the fact, of course, it was very damaging because it showed the initial encounter. And the initial encounter showed some, I guess, I don't agree with this, some supposed justification for how they reacted to this gentleman. And I don't condone that. I'm not sure how that impacted. I guess when you do a trial, Milton, as you know, it can be devastating if you give misinformation to a jury and the evidence come out contrary to that, it could cause you to lose the case. And so without looking at the transcript, I don't know, but I learned that was some very damaging evidence that was not shared that came out at trial, this in video, because that particular model body cam they were using, I can't remember, it was some 5 or something, it automatically records and has it on the cloud before they hit the record button.
Well, you would imagine a qualified prosecutor would be very demanding that evidence come in. But Nathaniel, I've been with some of these cases and I've looked at others and I've seen experienced prosecutors set back and let things be done that are just incredible. Like, again, I'll go back to the King case. The prosecutors didn't object to the case being moved in Simi Valley for trial, knowing that Simi Valley was a retirement community for police officers. They didn't object to that. You follow me? The prosecutors in that case did not call King as a witness because they were afraid he would be angry when he testified. You understand? I mean, it's like how you make those kinds of decisions or how you let those kinds of things happen in your case and not fight against it. And all they had to do was sit down with the man and talk to him for an hour or two to get his confidence and see why he was angry, because he thought he got a butt whooping. That's why he was upset. But it was no reason not to put him on the stand. But the jury didn't have that. They didn't have his testimony.
Hey, Marlon, also in Milton, something you didn't know, I played golf out in Simi Valley.
Oh.
And that was the only place in California that I ran across where there were these large Trump signs. You know, on off the golf course, you know, it's upscale area, they had these huge Make America Great signs. That's the only place in California I saw that. I'm thinking, what the hell? So most people realize that it's not just conservative, but that is the one point I felt, you know, that it was potentially a racial discriminatory type area with terms of the political signage they had. Some of the stuff they said was blatantly ignorant. And normally when you go to country club type atmosphere to play golf, you don't see that. But out there I did. It was off the Wood Ranch golf course. And I'm thinking, what the hell?
One other point I would make on that case, I took over the discovery that the prosecution had, and I read a police report that they had interviewed King on tape, the internal affairs, while he was in the county jail, the second day he was there. I said, I don't see that tape. They said, well, what tape? I said, there's a tape recording of King's interview the second day he's in jail, where he talked for about 55 minutes. The prosecutor, the lead trial attorney said, Milton, wait a minute, I don't know of such tape. He said, wait a minute, let me look at, he said, oh, I got an envelope here that hadn't been opened in the file box. I swear. And I heard him tearing open the envelope. He said, oh, here's the tape you're talking about. I said, so is that the tape that goes with this report that I have? He said, I guess so, but I've not seen this before. It admitted that in our discussion, that he had not seen a critical piece of, it turns out that it was not that helpful to them, but he didn't know he had a tape of King, a 55-minute interview the second day he was in the county jail talking about the incident. So what does that tell you? And at that time, one of the biggest cases in the country, you don't know your evidence. Now that's a true statement.
Well, I mean, I think the other issue that's closely aligned to that is that, you know, many times when you don't have diversity of thought, they disvalue opinions from certain sectors of our community, and that's why it's really important to make sure that your prosecutors' offices have a diverse group of people, people from the community, people from the city, people from outlying areas. And I don't think we've done as good a job as we should. I can tell you from my experience at the U.S. Attorney's Office that, hey, they're not that diverse in most districts. And I think, you know, we really need to make a concerted effort when we, you know, speak to, you know, those who are in law school, those contemplating law school, those that are out a few years, that, hey, these are good jobs to have, and you can make a substantial positive impact on your community. So I just think we do need to change our thinking in that regard. And I think we still need to advocate the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion, because the whole premise behind this sort of thing is that, you know, they're raising the victory flag in terms of, you know, civil rights. We no longer need a referee on the field. We do. There's so many different examples that will let you know that, you know, you need someone to make sure that people are being treated fairly. And by, this notion of having these EEOC guidelines I spoke about before, where you're basically prohibiting diversity, equity, inclusion, I think it just really takes us in the wrong area. Not only, as Nathaniel said, in terms of, getting, more diverse class of people in law school, but also has a negative impact in terms of the police that police our communities, and also the prosecutors' offices that shape those cases.
But Marlon, you said they're emptying prosecutors' offices out across the country, and they're emptying them out to replace them with who?
Well, it's not conjecture. If you look at Project 2025, and this administration basically has said, during the election process that, hey, what is it? And we are not adhering to it. There are materials that your audience can look online where they're actually tracking to see how much of Project 2025 has been implemented. So they are tracking that. And an important element of Project 2025 was having, 50,000 Trump, like-minded employees available to go in all these offices, whether it be U.S. attorney's offices, whether there be, federal offices, Department of Labor, the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. These are people that have a tremendous amount of discretion. And so, there are a number of, U.S. attorney's offices that, people are seeing the handwriting on the wall. They've been there some time, and they're saying, hey, look, I'm getting out of here. And the people that they're going to replace them with, according to Project 2025, is these group of people that have been vetted for years to ensure that, they meet this conservative litmus test. And these are the people that are going to go into these offices. So something that we really, really have to be concerned about.
My understanding is the birth child of 2025 started in 1970 with a guy named Lewis Powell, who was a young attorney who wrote this 6-page brief on the issue of minorities and women are taking over our education system and our government and our corporate system, corporate America. And there has to be a movement established and put into effect to lessen the impact of minorities and women throughout the systems that control our society. And that this project was born over 50 years ago by Lewis Powell and implemented by such millionaires as the guy for Coors Industry and other racist people who could influence our government. Controlled election, get the right people in place. And it seems as though they have finally achieved their goal in our society.
They have, and not only that, even more recently, if you look at the Heritage Foundation, it's a conservative organization that started some years ago, and part of their whole thing is that, and also the conservative movement, they not only are putting out, Project 2025, but a lot of these, conservative organizations are really spewing out talking points that are in, this talk radio. So if you listen to talk radio and you compare that to Fox News and you compare that to what the politicians are saying, they're all singing out the same hymnal, and that's not by accident. So it is all connected in some real sense, and it's just not conjecture. You can look at the product 2025 that basically says that. And it's unfortunate that, one of the outgrowths of that is that, even now on online community, there have been studies indicating that the overwhelming majority of, online videos are conservative. And then just to throw another piece in there that I want your audience to be aware of is there's a group called Prayer University. All right. And they put out a bunch of fake anti-historical videos that are very glitzy, and they're just totally wrong. They made, Christopher Columbus, out to be a hero. They justified slavery. They indicated that the Southern strategy was something that was made up. So people are consuming this, and it's really taking them down, a dark path, in my view.
Hey, I watched in horror an interview of 4 Black South Carolina voters And the common thing they had is they didn't believe in fake news. And so they got their news from Russia and China of TikTok. And so we have Black Americans, I'm watching on TV, that dumb enough to say, I don't believe my local news people I see. I believe people from foreign countries who make up news, and I believe them. It was the most damning thing I've seen as a lawyer. I'm thinking, you just can't make this up, that people are this freaking stupid. You know, I watched that in horror. I'm thinking, so these are this, what, 10, 15% of people that voted against their own interests because they get their news and somehow they can't see what is occurring, this constant attack. They don't see people look like them that are going to professional schools like we used to, or they don't see, and then are they going to be the one that get the bailout? And you know, recently, what disturbed me is that we admitted these people from South Africa, and they came in with special status. So we're going to take South Africa, which practiced racial segregation, where they went and took the Black folks' property and land and stuff, and now they're somehow victims. I mean, this whole thing is going crazy. And the fact that they're attacking the diversity, equity, and inclusion is what they're really saying is that we're going back to segregation.
Yep. The minorities and women have diluted our institutions, and we got to take them back. It's what they said. It's what they're working on.
Wow. But the second story, Marlon, Sean Diddy Combs. I don't know whether you guys following that stuff. That case disturbed me when this guy's been locked up the whole time. I'm not a Sean Combs fan, but the more I look at what's going on in that case, it's bothering me.
You know, many of us have daughters and, you know, nieces, and it's just really, you know, very, very disturbing. You know, I certainly do not, you know, condone the behavior hitting a woman, and what we saw that was publicly distributed in terms of the video over the Intercontinental is just reprehensible. So, you know, I think one of the challenges is that, you know, often prosecutors' offices, and Milton can kind of attest to this, a big part of the prosecution strategy is to dehumanize and make the defendant out to be the villain. And I think what we have to really be careful here is we have to look at the charges. And I think the defense is, you know, key claim is that this was consensual, and there was some evidence that came out in that regard. So I hope the news media and those that are watching will, you know, recognize this as reprehensible behavior. But what you almost have to have is a pie chart. Okay, here are the charges. What is the evidence on each charge? Now they've talked about RICO, which basically, you know, is a criminal enterprise across state lines. And so, you know, although Cassie testified a good bit this past week, the question is going to be whether or not all those boxes have been checked. But I just want to make sure the audience, you know, understands that, hey, this is reprehensible behavior, but you have to look at the charges that have been brought. What is the evidence? And there has been some evidence that the jury could latch on to say, hey, you know, some of these activities, I don't want to get too graphic on your show, freak-offs, as they mentioned throughout the testimony, and those were just, you know, sex parties. And the question would be whether or not, you know, Cassie, voluntarily, you know, participated. There were some text messages that came out that indicated that, hey, you know, she enjoyed this and wanted to participate in them. And I believe the prosecution's argument that, hey, you know, she was, you know, just influenced by this, and despite, you know, these, you know, text messages, that it was not consensual. So I know an Ohio jury, maybe an Indiana jury may see things, differently than a jury on the East or West Coast. I think in the Midwest, as a prosecutor, I think you would be in some trouble because the jury pool may just, believe the behavior is abhorrent. And if there's any evidence in terms of consent, they very well may say as a jury in the Midwest that, hey, look, I'm going to put a pox on both houses, and I'm not going to reach this very high standard of guilt beyond any reasonable doubt.
Well, she got $20 million too.
Yeah.
I mean, she took a really bad beating, but he paid her $20 million, a horrible beating. But look,
Yeah.
$20 million is a lot of freaking money, and that's what bothered me is that you make a civil settlement for misconduct, which I do every day. We have misconduct and people pay money, and then the cases kind of go away with somebody got killed or injured or otherwise. And that's what I don't understand. And I did watch part of this case, and maybe Milton, you can enlighten me, but I don't understand why they decided to have this prosecution of this individual, even though this conduct is despicable. But now you look at her text messages, and she even set up some of these freak offs, as it turns out. So this thing just bothered me that this trial has been like the trial of the century, and I don't understand it.
I didn't keep up with the trial testimony this week, but a friend of mine and I were talking on the phone yesterday or Thursday, and he was highly outraged about, man, it appears as though this woman participated voluntarily in this sexual partying and endeavors, that she could go and come as she wanted to as an adult. She was not chained or held to that place or location, that there is too much voluntariness on her part to do this conduct, that she has expressed enjoyment in, that this is bull, this prosecution. They're not impressed with the quality of evidence that's being presented against him, Marlon. I don't agree with hitting the woman or hitting anyone, but especially a man beating the woman, like that video that they show, or that they showed they're going near every day for the last year, of him pulling her down the hall and kicking her, etc. That's bad. I am not trying to equate that, or I'm not trying to accept that. But I do believe that we are entitled to due process and a fair prosecution, and not use that as our evidence, that one incident, to say that this man has done all that they say he's done. And it seems to be something unfair about that.
Let's take a call real quick. Call, you got a question or comment for us today. Go ahead. You have to unmute, caller. Go ahead. Okay, you're still muted.
And I'm not a fan of P. Diddy at all, but
No, I'm not either. I mean,
he's
it's
entitled to
reprehensible.
Okay, caller, what's your question or comment?
Hello?
Yes, go ahead. Who's speaking?
This is Guy calling.
Hey,
This is Guy calling. I just wanted to say that touching on your last topic, when the news first broke about this federal raid to Diddy's house, it seemed like they were trying to push it that he was involved in racketeering. And the trial so far seems to be being reduced to this young lady. So I just wonder about the prosecution's case in this matter. The other thing was, I think the crux of the situation in terms of the United States racial situation, the motto "E pluribus unum" seems to be cast aside into the trash can by the current federal administration. And I think that's kind of the crux of the situation. People, a lot of people from the MAGA group don't seem to want to accept the fact that basically people are human beings regardless of skin tone, and it seems that any efforts to try to promote the fact that everybody is human rather than worry about the skin tone situation or stereotypes or generalizations, which, as you know, are not so reliable. I think that any efforts to try to ameliorate the stereotypes seem to have been being diminished in a lot of ways. Now, one example in Indiana, for instance, Indiana loves basketball. Nate, you may remember John Moss and whatnot in the federal suit by Judge Hugh Dillon back in the day when integration was tried to be administered in the city of Indianapolis and surrounding townships and counties. There was quite a lot of pushback by those who lived in those communities that they did not want to accept people of a different race, so-called race or skin tone, what culture or whatever. Now, years later, when you look at the basketball teams of these various townships and counties, you wonder how people back then were so ignorant, if you get my drift.
Well, I know a lot about that case. I ended up representing John Moss in 2003 towards the end to get attorney fees. And they were, instead of integration, they were doing desegregation. In other words, they were trying to give equal opportunity for Black students to have the same resources as white students. And that was a whole push to make sure that our education system was fair. And but it's not fair, Guy. There's still some significant problems. Okay, next caller, you have a question or comment for us? Go ahead. Hello, caller.
Hi, how are you? I just wanted to touch on the Diddy case. I don't know if anybody's ever been a victim of domestic violence or relationship violence, or if anybody on this panel has ever been in a relationship where they've been with someone who's passive aggressive. I'm talking about a relationship and a marriage. I've been in a marriage where somebody was emotionally and mentally abusive, and it took me time to decide to leave that person. And anybody looking on the outside could say, well, why didn't you leave them when they did this? This was a red flag. This was a red flag. This was a red flag. This young lady was 19 years old trying to make a career up for herself. So I don't know what her thought processes were for sticking with this. I have no idea. I haven't followed the case thoroughly either, but I did read some snippets to my sister from the New York Post and what was said during the trial. And what I can gather is that she was drugged a lot of the time, and not voluntarily. I mean, and these are other people who are testifying to that they watched this man put drugs in her stuff and made her drink it. So to me, that's not a consensual relationship. And there have been other testimonies that from other people who said, yeah, I was actually responsible for keeping her in line and making sure that she traveled with us to other places, that she couldn't just be free. So I don't know about you, but if you're under the influence all the time, I personally think that you cannot give consent to anything. And I think that's where the problem lies. If other people are testifying that she actually was drugged a lot of the time and she didn't voluntarily take the drugs, and that she was taken to other places while under the influence, that's not consent. So I don't know, maybe the RICO charges will stick because she was taken other places because she was not in her right state of mind, that she can make decisions to whether or not she wanted to go, but that's where I think they might be going. That's my one point on that.
Well,
my
wait a
other
second,
thing
Renee,
is I wanted to talk.
hey, one of the
Yes.
problems I had though is that there was like 1,000 text messages that illustrated that one of the big issue they had is that she had an affair with someone else and he was upset. I mean, she had a sexual relationship with another guy during this entire deal that she's dating him. And this whole process, she had signed a 10 record deal with his Bad Boy Records. But the problem that I saw though is that there's so much tape or text messages that she submitted that showed that she acquiesced the conduct. So the sexual encounter
That she allegedly submitted. Because one of the things I'm going to say, I don't know if they can prove this or not, but when you're under the influence of drugs and you don't have your own money, you don't have your own place, and this man is so controlling. Do you think that he did not have access to her phone and her computer, that maybe she didn't send the text messages? Maybe it was him sending the text messages, because he seemed like he was pretty controlling over whatever she did sexually and whatever else she did. And so I'm not sure that she sent them.
Hey, but Renee,
that's my thing.
That's the problem, though.
Yes.
She admitted on the stand that she did.
Yeah.
Hey, Renee, she admitted that
Yes.
she sent these text messages. So that's, in other words, the actual evidence in here is pretty damning. So the point is that.
Did she say she sent it voluntarily is my question. Or did she feel like she had no choice because he was standing over her and telling her what to say? I don't know.
Well,
I'm just saying, if somebody is that controlling over what you do with your body and what you can't do with your body, I'm not sure how much they're not controlling what you are supposed to say to other people. I looked at pictures of her when she was out with Diddy, and I looked at her and I was like, oh my God, look how well she's smiling. But I could tell you from being in a relationship like that, when I went out in public, I didn't let people know either what was happening in my house, because it was private. So if you're thinking, and I'm not in her position, but I can imagine as a young woman who's trying to get her career going, if you're thinking that this person is going to actually help you get your career going, and you keep believing that and believing that and believing that one day, they're going to, and if you're under the influence, maybe you think that if I just smile and somebody else might see how much I'm worth, and because I'm sitting on his arm and I can get a break that way. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm not saying. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, I empathize, with your situation. As I said before, I have, daughters and sisters, nieces, and nobody has the right to be abusive. And I'm sorry that you went through, what you've talked about. I think in terms of this case, they haven't presented it as a domestic violence case. It's the key that's going to get, allegedly get Diddy the jail time is RICO, taking somebody across state lines, having a criminal enterprise. And I think, what, I'm saying, and I think, what Milton and Nate are saying is that, we're not, agreeing with the behavior. We're saying, well, hey, in order to get a conviction, here are some of the challenges that you have. Now, I agree with you that abuse causes a lot of people to react differently. But when the prosecution is bringing this case, it's their job to rehabilitate the witness, explain some of those things that you've talked about, and they really have not. They've really overly relied upon, the domestic violence, which isn't, the thing that they're charging him with. And they haven't spent as much time, in my opinion, as they should on the issue of a criminal enterprise. And the problem or the challenge I think they're going to have is that, when you have, text messages, indicating, one text message indicated, Diddy said, well, hey, you don't have to do this. And she says, yeah, I want to continue to do that. We got to recognize that's a problem for your case. Now, whether or not the jury, sees things the prosecution's way or Diddy's way, I don't know. But I think as an experienced attorney, we got to recognize that is a potential problem in terms of your case. And then the other problem is in terms of your focus. The focus.
Thank you for your Thank you for your expert opinion. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just looking at it from a different viewpoint, and I haven't seen all of the trials, so I can't comment on any of that, but I appreciate you explaining that to me. I just would be curious what's on the other tapes that they have, because apparently they have a lot of tapes, and I'll be curious about that. But I'm going to stop there, and I just have a question about what do you think about SCOTUS's ruling on the Alien Enemies Act, and then I'm going to hang up. Thank you so much.
Well, wait a second. We have about 3 callers, so let me get a couple of these people for a time. A caller, Joyce Avery, what's your question and comment for us today? We'll try to get everybody before the show ends here. Go ahead, ma'am. Hello? You on the air? What's your question?
This Pierre.
Oh, Pierre. Okay, we lost Joyce. Okay, go ahead, Pierre. What's your question coming today, sir?
One quick question about Diddy. The government is, playing up, like Guy said, what happened to Cassie. I guess my question is, at what point does his attorney say, when does sex, drugs, and rock and roll become illegal? And I guess my other question is, I'll just leave it at that. When does that become, and is this a thing where people's careers don't turn out the way they wanted it to be, and then all of a sudden it's abuse and rape and all of that? At some point, when do these people go to the police? And that's my question. Thank you.
Well, in all honesty, that's what we're saying, is that none of us support domestic violence. It's horrible. But the problem is he's not charged with domestic violence. And the reason being is that they're probably outside the applicable statute of limitation to file those charges. So now what domestic violence got a different protocol than what they're charging them with. There's a lot of things that should happen in a domestic violence case, like there's counseling, a lot of different things. And so when I watched this case, I think Marlon explained it very well, that, we're looking at horrible misconduct, but it's sort of like if you go out and, say, shot somebody in the foot, and then you charge them with speeding. In other words, I'm trying to connect the two, and the two don't connect. And that's why I'm having a problem with this case, these charges. I thought that when I looked at that, Milton, it looked like he was charged with the wrong thing. I don't know.
Answer Pierre's direct question, sex, violence, and rock and roll, when does it become illegal? I think just common sense tells you that, Pierre. It becomes illegal when it's involuntary. But they have undoubtedly evidence indicating that it was voluntary. So that's dealing with the domestic violence part. But as Marlon was saying, the charges are RICO, crossing state line, committed for the purpose of committing the crime or doing something illegal. I don't know if they've gotten to that part yet or not. I just haven't kept up with the facts and the evidence in the case. But it seems like they got a problem with the public, because the person I was talking to is rather objective in most situations. And I know he's not in approval of domestic violence, but he was just saying, man, from what they showed this week, the judge should dismiss this case before they even get to the defense, because they haven't established a prima facie case here at all on RICO. And I don't know how they are presenting their evidence, what order they're going to present it, but they sure seem to have failed to the public in their initial evidence. And I would think, Marlon, that you want to grab the attention of the jury and the public to show what kind of case you have at the beginning.
Correct.
You don't want people to get in the mindset that you don't have a case, and then they got to go back and give you a case. That's not how you prosecute a case.
And then a big part of that is that, hey, we're allegedly recruiting sex workers across state lines. And it's devastating if you have a text message showing that Cassie was involved in that process in terms of selecting people. So that is a problem. Now, whether the jury, eventually convicts, I don't know. But I think what we're saying, and I'm saying is that, number one, it's reprehensible what's shown, but it's whether or not the charge is presented, whether or not you have any conflicting evidence that could prohibit a jury from convicting, and whether or not you're distracting the jury by not focusing on those critical issues at the early forefront. But again, just want to repeat over and over again, we're not discounting, domestic violence. People react differently to it. There's no excuse, but we need to really focus in on the charges and the proof.
Yeah, I thought that what I've seen so far is that they're prosecuting for domestic violence, which is outside the applicable statute of limitation, versus this criminal enterprise. Because as a practical matter, in the entertainment, one of the corollary that we see from time to time, they have sex, they use drugs. And now one of the big things that we see is that they treat drug addiction and drug use as a health issue versus a crime, and I'm not sure this sexual type conduct, how does it equate to criminality when in fact that's something that is probably not an isolated incident in the entertainment. I see some of these videos I see of these performing artists are so sexually explicit, I don't even watch them anymore. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how the jury reach a verdict in this case. And now, unfortunately, next weekend is a Memorial Day weekend, and so we won't be on the air, next weekend. And I'm sorry that we won't be able to talk to all the people that are still waiting to talk to us, and we'll try to pick up on this in a couple of weeks because Marlon and Milton look like this trial is still going to be going on in 2 weeks.
It's going to be a long trial. I know the judges commented that the cross-examination is taking longer than anticipated, but everyone deserves their day in court. So I do fully expect this trial to be going on in the next 2-3 weeks.
Well, thank you everyone for all our callers, and thank you for our superstar panels, and we'll be talking to you in 2 weeks. Take care, everybody. Have a good day and have a great Memorial Day weekend. Take care.
Oh,